Hi, everyone. Thank you guys for joining. We're just going to wait a few minutes for Dr. Odunsi to pop in. And if in like 1 minute she's not in, we'll have the current panelists introduce themselves and then we'll get started. So just bear with us for like 1 minute, please. Okay, it is 7:01, and I respect everyone's time. So we are going to get started. We are also streaming from YouTube, so we have some people on YouTube. So I'm going to be monitoring both Q&A on both sides. Hello, everyone. As you guys know, my name is Shona Edebagbo. I'm currently a rising second-year med student. I'm so happy to be done with first year. As you guys know, we've been doing the pre-med Zoom parties for the last few weeks, and this week is probably my most exciting week because we're going to talk about the things I love the most. And one of them is talking about money. So today's panel, we're going to be talking about how to finance your medical education, things to think about, and we're going to hear from our panelists from different perspectives. So I'm really excited. So I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Dean Olson, and then we'll move to Ista.
Hi there. My name is Tara Olson. I'm the Assistant Dean of Financial Aid at Tufts University School of Medicine, and I've been working in financial aid for about 28 years. So I'm pretty familiar with the challenges that go along with different studies. I have been at the School of Medicine for about 20 years working with medical students and graduate health science students. So I'm really excited that this opportunity arose where I can kind of share my expertise and my knowledge, and hopefully everybody will learn a little something and get prepared to start their medical school journey. Ista.
All right. So hi, I'm Ista. I just recently graduated from Tufts Medical School. I'm currently in the transitional year intern at Brockton Hospital, and I'll be moving to Baltimore next year to complete my training in dermatology at Johns Hopkins. I graduated debt-free from Tufts Medical School, so that's very exciting. I'm very passionate about dermatology, skin of color, and personal finance. I love talking about money. So welcome.
Thank you both. And Dr. Odunsi is currently coming out of the OR, so she'll be joining us soon. So for the attendees, if you guys have questions, please put your questions in the Q&A so we don't lose track of them and they can stay organized so we can ask them at the end of the session. And as Dean Olson begins with her presentation, if you have any clarifying questions or anything like that, please put it in the Q&A. For those watching from YouTube, you can put it in the chat box and I'll be monitoring those questions as well. So Dean Olson, I'm going to take it over to you first.
Okay. So I wanted to put together some kind of information to share with you, and I'm trying to make this information that's not specific to my institution, but just more generalized as you pursue your studies in a medical school, but it is going to be geared towards private because there's a significant difference between private and public education. So the first thing you have to think about is, what are the direct costs? So what are the costs that you're actually going to be billed by the university? Tuition, fees, sometimes health insurance, because those are the things that have to be paid upfront, right? Either at the time school starts or shortly before even. But you also have to plan for what your indirect costs are, what your living expenses are going to be. Room, board, transportation costs, anything and everything that it costs really to live in that area. And so if you are moving across the country, you may find that there's a very significant difference in your clothing needs due to weather, or just even the essentials, what it costs for rent compared to where you live now. So you really want to research that and have an idea of the costs in that part of the country. Now, every school is going to give you what's called a cost of attendance, and it's an estimated cost of what you should start planning to pay. Now's the time, whether you're getting prepared to apply for medical school, maybe you've already applied and you're getting ready to start. It's never too late to continue your planning, but you really want to start thinking about some basic questions, right? So each school is going to be a little bit different. The financial aid office, I'll tell you right now, they are your friend. They are not there to prevent you from getting aid. Do not be afraid to share information. Sometimes people, don't want to overshare because they're afraid something will be taken away from them. That's not the case. We're here to help, nothing more, not hinder. So you want to start, looking on their webpage or just talking to a financial aid professional and asking the questions of what aid is going to be available. Do they have institutional funding? Not everyone does. Does that include just scholarships, or is it institutional loans? Is it both? How do you qualify? Is it merit? Is it need-based? Is it both? There's a really big difference in what schools can do if it's need-based only versus merit. Probably the most important question to ask is, what is their priority deadline? Because you'll find that you might have qualified for aid, but you didn't know this deadline existed and you missed handing in some applications. So you really want to, make sure that you're covering all bases. You do not want to find that you didn't get aid just because you were simply late. And our deadline's in March. A lot of schools actually have February deadlines. So you really want to take note of those when you're applying. So I thought I would start with just kind of thinking about, before you even apply for medical school and start thinking about how you're going to pay for that, there's actually a cost, before you start attending, right? So while you're applying, you're submitting your fee of $170 to apply at one school, and then it's an additional $42 at each school. How are you going to pay for that, right? That's the primary fee through MCAS. The secondary fees are applications that the schools actually have for their own application. So at Tufts, our fee this year was $0. And we don't know what's going to happen in future years, but our fee at one point was $200. So it really can range. A lot of times you can ask for a waiver for that fee, and I'll get to that in just a moment. So the other thing you want to think about is, again, just to even just start applying, you have to complete that MCAT exam, right? That fee is $320 a year. It does include some prep materials, but it's an expensive out-of-pocket expense that happens well before you begin your studies. So AAMC has a fee assistance program. If you make 400% or less than the 2020 national poverty level, and it's all based on family size, so I put the website that you can look that up, they will reduce your MCAT fee from $320 to $130. They will include your prep materials, and they will also waive that MCAS application fee for up to 20 schools. A lot of students don't even realize, or applicants don't even realize this is there, and they don't utilize it. So, if you think that your family may qualify, please make sure you apply for that. And what happens at a lot of schools is, if you are eligible for the fee assistance program through the AAMC, the schools, not always, but many, will actually waive that secondary app fee if there is one. So you can actually save a lot of money. And then there's the additional costs. How are you going to get to your interviews at each school? This year, it's very unique because of COVID. So, we haven't been doing in-person interviews, but most medical schools do require an in-person interview outside of where we're at right now with the pandemic. But you have to account for travel arrangements. How are you going to get there? Is it a train? Is it a car? Is it a plane? Do you have to stay overnight because your interview's in the morning and it's too far to take a quick drive? Do you have a suit? Will you have moving expenses when you finally determine which school you're going to attend? There's prep materials, there's practice exams. So don't get overwhelmed, but there is an actual expense for the application process. Now, in terms of federal assistance, it's going to be very different than undergrad. The Pell Grant program, SEOG, Teach grants, those are no longer available for grad professional students. So really the only federal programs that you're dealing with is loans, and the majority are going to be unsubsidized. That means that interest is going to start accruing immediately upon disbursement. So you have your unsub loans and your grad plus loans. They're direct loans. They have different fees. The unsubsidized has a fee of 1%, and the grad plus is just over 4%. The interest rates are different. The unsub interest rate and grad plus is determined every year. It's based on the treasury bill, but they're locked in for life. So for 21-22, the unsub has a 5.28 interest rate. The grad plus is always 1% higher. So it's 6.28% in 21-22. And it states there that the interest does accrue immediately upon disbursement. Typically, your loans are going to come half in the fall, half in the spring. They don't come all at once. But you're not going to be responsible for paying that interest right away. It's just going to start accruing on the side. Now, there are some subsidized loans available. Most of you in undergrad would qualify for what's called the subsidized direct loan. That no longer exists. But there is something called a primary care loan, a loan for disadvantaged students, and HPSL. Not every school participates, so it's something that you're going to have to ask. But if they do participate and you're interested, you can request more information. Primary care loans are generally only given out in 3rd and 4th year to students that are pursuing a primary care specialty. And we don't have very much money in this program. It really depends on the size of the school. Loans for disadvantage, again, it's usually based on your economic or your environmental disadvantage status. And I guess the benefit of these is that there's no interest accruing during school, and it's only a 5% interest rate thereafter. So there are a few options, potentially. The other thing you can consider is private loans, private scholarships, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Institutional aid, most schools are going to require not only your information, but your parents' information as well. And that's because financial aid looks at 2 years prior. So for the 21-22 academic year, we're looking at 2019 income. And so a lot of students would be in school, and eventually everyone's going to have, practically all need because they're not working. So that's really the only way that schools can kind of sort out who the neediest students are when they're trying to give away their need-based aid. There's service-based aid, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then there's always other options for some applicants. It's not available for everybody, but if your family's willing to help, please don't turn that help down. Please accept it, and you can repay it to them at a later time when your earnings are sufficient. Some students do have some savings or 529 plans that parents or grandparents set up for them. There's always graduation gifts that you can use, from your undergrad college to maybe help get you at least through the application process. And then there's employment and self-help where you can work a little while you're going to school, but it's going to be minimal dollars that are earned. The service-based aid that I mentioned, so there's kind of 2 different paths you can go. There's military, and that's called HPSP, Health Professions Scholarship Program. It's the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force that participate. The National Guard does as well. Their program's slightly different, but they pay all your tuition, all your fees, your books, your supplies, some reimbursable things like buying a new computer, and they give you a stipend for each month to try to get you by with your living expenses. So it varies a little between military and National Health Service Corps is very similar. That's for folks that are really 100% committed that they're going into primary care. and they're willing to practice in an underserved area. So National Health Service Corps, you can break the contract if you're 2 years in and you kind of change your mind. It's rare, but you do have to repay everything back, and you repay it back with some significant interest added on. The military, you can't really break that contract. You go in as an officer, you really are part of the armed forces. So it's a really big commitment for both, and you need to think about it before you sign up for it. But in return for every year that they fund you, you owe them a year of commitment back. So if they pay for 4 years of medical school, you're going to have 4 years of service, and your residency does not count. So again, there are options. Some people, they're not fully committed, but they think they might want to go that path. There are loan repayment programs on the end that you can do in place of the scholarship. So the standard process will always consist of a FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. And usually schools are going to have some other supplemental forms you fill out. Parental information is typically required, as I mentioned, but we have, a general application that we collect, and we collect tax returns as well. So again, every school is going to be a little different. The most important thing that I mentioned is the financial aid deadline, and please do not wait until you're accepted. Apply right away. If you think you're going to go to that school, apply. That way, if you get accepted later in the process, they already have all your forms, you've met the deadline, and you should, get a package pretty quickly. The last thing that you do is you review your award notice. You're going to compare your award notices with other aid you're getting from other schools, and you're going to turn around and either accept or decline the aid, and you're going to do some supplemental forms that each school is going to require for federal loans. So what can you start doing now? Right? So you have, some people are going to think about doing alternative loans instead of federal loans. If that's the case, even if it's not the case, you need to start looking at what your credit score is, right? So your credit score follows you for 7 years, your credit stays on. And if you have anything on your credit now that you can get rid of, now's the time to do it, because by the time you're done with residency, anything that's negative on your credit report would be removed at that point. So I just wanted to give you an idea. A lot of people they have no understanding of really what goes into a FICO calculation, but it looks at your payment history. That means your on-time payments or your late payments. It looks at how much of your credit you're using. So if you have a $2,000 credit card and you're using $1,500 of it, you're using, above the amount that they would want you to look at. It's really around 30% they want you to pay. They're looking at your credit history, how long you've had a credit card, the type of credit that you use, whether it's loans and credit cards. So your educational student loans are going to impact your credit score a lot differently than a credit card will. And then how much is new credit? Are you applying for new credit cards at 10 different places? That's going to make your score really sink. So in order to kind of understand credit and know the impact, you have to know what goes into that calculation. And I just mentioned here, your credit can be as low as 300 and as high as 850. It depends on which agency is looking, but just to make you aware. But now's the time to start managing your personal finances, right? So you could reduce your balances. You could pay off any credit cards you have if you have the funding, but do not start closing those credit accounts, because your credit history is probably so small of a portfolio that if you go and you start closing credit cards, it could really make your credit score dive unwillingly, unknowingly. You want to make sure that you're paying everything and then just let it sit out there. You don't have to take action and close it. It can just sit out there. Don't use it. The best thing you could do is have a credit card, use it once or twice a year, just make even a small $25 purchase and then pay it off in 1 month. That's going to make your score stay high, and use very little of your available credit. So it's kind of two things making your score go high at once. You want to look at NSLDS, that's the national database, and you just want to make sure all your loans are in good standing if you have loans in undergrad. So any federal loans would be reported there. If they're in repayment, deferment, forbearance, those are all great statuses. You just want to make sure nothing's being reported erroneously, that it's late. or, you didn't know you went into repayment on something. You just want to take action and make sure you're viewing that information. So I already mentioned this, but if you pay off a credit card and you close the account, it's going to affect the length of your credit history, how much credit utilization, and it's going to unintentionally lower that score. So do not do that. So again, now's the time to start thinking about limiting versus eliminating, right? So limiting things is good, right? You can maybe cook and eat at home more than you eat out. Maybe you have, so many subscriptions of Hulu and Netflix and cable. Maybe you can just cancel a couple of those that you're not using. Limit your credit card spending. Maybe don't go on really expensive travel excursions, but it doesn't mean you have to cut everything out. That's a big mistake that people make because they think they can't do anything. It's not realistic. Of course, you're going to have access to some fun and, spending money. But start thinking about the fact that you should have a roommate. You can borrow books and DVDs from the library. There's tons of student discounts out there. And I mentioned Zip car coupons, public transportation if you're in an area that supports that. Start thinking with the mentality of, any borrowing that you're doing, you're actually borrowing from your future earnings, right? So you're repaying $1.67 for every dollar that you borrow. If you pay on time, if you pay early or you delay your payment, that number is going to change a little bit. Check, we have a saying in my office, check the budget's vital signs, right? Budgets are fluid, they change. But if you can find a way to just trim $5 out of your day, you're going to end up, really saving a lot of money in the long term. And it's little things, it's just, little tiny changes that you make. But if you save $5 a day over a year, that's $1,800 that you're saving per year. During medical school, you're saving $7,300. And if you're not borrowing $7,300, you're really saving $12,000. So again, it's all in the lifestyle. Create a spending plan now. It's really important that you start thinking about what your monthly costs are because there's little things that you might not consider. If you get your nails done or your hair done, you don't necessarily think, oh, that's a monthly cost, but it does work in, maybe every 6 weeks. If you have an older car and you might need a little maintenance every month, you want to definitely consider something like that. And always, always, always have some, additional money put in there for going to the movies or having fun time with your friends. You're not going to go to medical school for 4 years and have no, budget for supplemental expenses that you may have. So again, I've been doing this for a while, and this is, kind of the message I like to say to people is have your 3 months of living expenses ready when you arrive at school. It's not as cheap to secure housing as, you may think. You have to do first, last, security. You're going to have immediate needs. Maybe you have to get clothing for the winter and you've never experienced that before. The financial aid funds are going to disperse at the beginning of each term. So for my school, it's fall and spring. You have to take that money that you get back from the school and really budget that. And it's going to last you throughout that semester. So what we advise students is any overage you have that you're refunded, put that in a savings account, and then you work out your budget. You know exactly what your costs are for the month, and you set up so your savings automatically, forwards that money to your checking account every month. That way you can't overspend. If you are overspending, you have to redo your budget. Borrow only what you need. Have a plan before you start. Don't get to school and then try to backtrack into it. Really start thinking about, what that budget's going to look like. Continue to apply for financial aid every year. Outside scholarships especially. I have found that some outside scholarships, I don't know why, but they're more apt to award second, third, fourth year medical students money than they do for incoming. And I think it's because a lot of places just want to see 1 year of grades and how successful students were academically. And meet with your advisors. We are here to help. We are not here to hinder. And then lastly, I just included some resources that I thought would prove to be helpful. The one on here I really want to focus on is, there's actually two. The AAMC's first program, it's all financial information for medical school applicants, students, and then residents. So it has different paths that they share some really helpful tools. And then reviewing your credit report. Everybody should review their credit report annually. You can do this for free. I highly recommend it. There's lots of chance that there could be errors on there. So you want to get those resolved. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Sean.
Thank you so much, Dean Olson. That was really helpful. We have a lot of questions, excuse me, for you, but I'm going to get to them maybe towards the end or try to integrate them into the sessions now. We have Dr. Odunsi with us, so I'm going to have her introduce herself before we get into the question panel portion.
Hello, everyone. Very excited to be here. Apologies for being late. I had a late OR day, and thank you for inviting me here, Sharon. My name is Dr. Tosin Odunsi. I am a minimally invasive GYN fellow in Atlanta, very much interested in endometriosis and fibroid management, both medically and surgically, and newly board certified OBGYN. So yes, this is a real Zoom party today. And I definitely believe in building generational wealth and multiple streams of income, if you read the bio. And I don't believe in being a typical physician that works themselves to the ground. I believe in multiple streams of income. So I will talk about that later. But thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you all so much. So I'm going to get into the questions, and I'll probably ask like a question that applies to everyone in different ways or may apply to one person. But I think my first question is just coming off of Dean Olson's presentation. I think you mentioned some scholarships, but I think one of the biggest questions is, how do you search for scholarships for graduate school, you know, outside of the military or the public service or the primary care one? Is how can people get funded if not through those two?
Okay, so here's a little bit of a cheat. On our website, which is medicine.tufts.edu, we have a link to outside resources, and it's scholarship resources that we found throughout the years, and we've tried to put into a document. It's a live document. It's changing all the time, but it will actually direct you to health profession scholarships. It may be for medical school, or it may be for graduate health science students, because we serve both, but you could start there. And I also included a couple links at the end of my presentation that I'm happy to share with everybody. But FastWeb, it's a great resource. Talk to your church, talk to your high school, talk to your college, Google. I mean, there's so many tools. It is very time consuming, but do not be afraid to, yes, I will put that in the chat. Do not be afraid to look and ask. Just don't ever pay a scholarship application fee. If they're asking you for money to get money, that's a sign that it's likely a scam. So be really careful, because people are taken advantage of all the time.
Thank you. My next question, and this I think is going to apply to everyone from their own expertise. So as you know, throughout medical school, there are expenses such as the board exams, traveling for residency interviews, which can be quite expensive if you didn't have your virtual residency interview. How does the school budget for this, or how did you budget for this or manage your money to account for these extra things that are not directly like paying your tuition or they're a part of your education, but you know what I mean?
I can answer that. When I was doing I didn't do any away rotations, so that saved money as well. But when I was doing my interviews, I'm trying to think of what I did. I actually wanted to be in a certain location. So I scheduled them so they were close together and took some time away from school. I let people know that I'm going to be gone for a couple of days, and tried to put them back to back and put it on a rotation that wasn't too heavy. I can't remember which rotation, like pathology or something. But I didn't do on a heavy rotation. So that was something that I used. And then I tried to book flights as early as I could. A lot of my interviews were drivable. So once I got to the place, I would drive, I would ask, so I'm Nigerian, my mom knows every Nigerian on earth, it seems like. So I would stay with relatives as well. I think I only booked one hotel the whole time, but don't be afraid to ask people, like, I just need a place to stay for the night. I'm hungry. Pull all those stops, and that'll cut some costs.
I recently went through the process of applying for residency programs. And for me, thankfully, there was COVID, so I didn't have to travel anywhere. Everything was virtual, thankfully for that. But for me, in terms of planning for board exams and residency applications, I'm a planner. So I knew those were going to be expenses that will have to be incurred over the 4 years of medical school. So I opened savings accounts. I called one step 1, the other one step 2 CK, step 2 CS, and residency applications. And whenever I made a little bit of money, because I worked when I was in medical school, work study, very small job, I will put a little bit, towards my each saving account. And once I was done with one, I will move on to the other one. And I also had a lot of research awards and fellowships over the course of my 4 years in medical school, and that helped me fund those savings accounts as well. So I think planning ahead is very important. Once you get into medical school, you have to take those exams. You know how much they cost. So planning ahead and having a plan, you have to be intentional about it so that it doesn't cut you off guard and you're like, oh, I didn't know I had to spend $1,000 on step 1. Those fees are going to have to be paid somehow. So plan ahead and yeah.
Very important. And I'd also say, if you know the number of programs you're going to apply to, you can allocate that amount. So if your score is like borderline, you might be applying to 50 programs as opposed to somebody who has a higher step 1 score. They might just be able to do 20, 30. So definitely keep that in mind. You want to go on the higher end of everything, and the exam dollars don't end. This last board, I feel like I spent $10,000. Probably not ridiculous, but they're still asking for money because I have to pay for membership for ABOG and Society of Laparoscopic Surgeons and AAGL. There are all these societies and they all want money. So it's a never ending story. So you just have to keep budgeting and get into that habit now.
Here is Dean Olson. I believe schools usually budget this for the students. Do you, especially with residency, when different students might be applying to different amount of programs or have a different profile of what works, how does the school decide, okay, this is the average amount we're budgeting for their step exam, or for them to travel for this, or for them to do that?
Yeah, so what we do is we inflate our travel a little to accommodate it, but most schools are only going to budget a couple $1,000s. It's really up to the student to, try to, again, it's going to depend on the school, but, when students are applying for residency, we have a full year of travel built in, that they're on vacation months or they're not traveling to different clerkships, and we're still accounting for it to try to give them a buffer. Some schools are going to only put in 2,000, some are going to put in 5,000. So it's really going to depend on what each school does. Like, one thing that we do is we have alumni that are willing to sign up and let students stay with them for free. So I think that's becoming kind of a new thing, to connect current students with alumni to stay over to reduce costs. And in the past, you had to do step 2 clinical skills, and that was only in 5 cities, but they're no longer doing that. So that's saving a few $1,000s right off the bat compared to, even ISTA's current class.
Thank you. Moving on to my next question. And this question is going to, I think, apply to everyone in different ways. What does exit financial aid counseling look like? What are the things students should be counseled on as they face their debt upon graduation? And then for Dr. Odunsi, because I know you paid off your debt, what was your plan when you graduated, and how did that change over the time during your residency and the time you were attending? And now you're back to a fellow, so I'm even curious what that change in income looks like. For Ista, you graduated debt free. Did you even have a exit counseling, or kind of how did you navigate med school to be debt free? And then for Dean Olson, how do you actually talk to? Obviously, it's going to be situation dependent, but what are the things you have students think about as they graduate?
I'll start. We do very intense exit counseling. It's, the session's required. It's 90 minutes. We do it in groups. COVID's changed things, obviously, because instead of doing in person, we did it remotely. Moving forward, we're going to offer it in both paths. But we know a lot of students, after they attend the session, they want to have a one-on-one with us. And we provide calculators so they can kind of look at some of their data and come in with very specific one-on-one questions. First off, no one should ever choose a specialty based on income. Follow your passion. You don't want financials driving your decisions with that. But there is a path to repayment, because instead of loan payments being determined based on debt, right now it's really based on income. There's public service loan forgiveness that's talked about. If, it's a complicated subject. Let's just say that. I mean, there's a reason why it takes us 90 minutes, but your school is going to do, no matter where you go, a very individualized session, and a lot of different things are going to be talked about. We're starting to do them even in third year, kind of a high level overview for people that are really anxious about it. But it's money. Not everyone feels comfortable. Some people are in denial. They don't want to deal with it. Others really want to, get into the nitty gritty in third year and figure out what they're borrowing. So that's, a very personal decision. And you just need to talk to the financial aid office. They're going to put your fears to rest. You will pay this loan debt off. It sounds incredibly high for some, but it's relative to your earnings. And there's a path. There's a path. Very, very few medical students or medical professionals, ever default on their loans.
I can go next. So as for me, when I got accepted into medical school, my priority was to go to the most affordable school. And when Tufts gave me the full tuition, I was like, woo, yay. So I can see a path to graduating debt-free. So from the get-go, I was very intentional about it. So when I started, I'm married. My husband was working as well and was going to school full-time as well. So that was tough financially. But I made sure I applied to every single scholarship I could set my eyes on, literally. I think I applied to over $200,000 worth of scholarship. And every single summer, I say I made about 10 to 15,000 every summer. And I was able to also help pay my husband's tuition with the money that I made. I also did some work study at Tufts where I was a video uploader when we used to upload videos back in the days. Oh, you still do that? Oh, okay. And I used to make $50 a week or something like that. That was almost $200 a month. So that was grocery money for us. And I have braid hair, so sometimes I'll find a gig here and there, make some money, at $200 here and there. So any way I could find some money, I did it, literally, and that helped us a lot, tremendously. Then fourth year comes, I gave birth to a beautiful son. And so finances were very, very tight, very, very tight. But thankfully, COVID helped us a lot because I didn't have to drive in for clinicals. We received a lot of money from either the school or the government. So that helped a lot. I didn't have to pay for daycare. So a lot of these things helped us a lot. Because during the last year, we thought we would have to take on loans. There was just no way we could have made it if it wasn't for COVID and all the financial aid we received from different sources. So yeah, that's how I was able to graduate medical school debt-free, by being very proactive and always applying. I have like 1,000 scholarship essays in my computer. I'm ready to delete them. But yeah.
We're gonna have to talk off.
Don't delete them. I need them. I need them for my mentees.
We're gonna have to talk offline because you did something right and I'm trying to copy that. But over to you, Dr. Odunsi.
First of all, I'm so impressed by Ista and how ambitious and it's not even aggressive, like she's a go-getter. And that's the attitude that I like, because you can either sit there and let the financial thing happen to you, or you can figure it out. And everything is figure outable when it comes to money, I believe. And then Dean Olson, your program sounds amazing, because we got a meeting February of our 4th year talking about like a little bit of debt management, but it wasn't throughout our medical school journey. It was just, okay, you're almost done. Here you go. Bye. So it was something that I definitely wish that we got coming into medical school. Just some background. I'm a first generation immigrant from Nigeria. My father and mother came here a very long time ago. My dad is a physician, but he came over with my mom and my 2 sisters when residents were making like less than the poverty line, pretty much. And they were still able to get my sisters and I through college debt free. They were able to pay off their home in under 10 years. And the theme is that they lived way below their means and they were consistent. So Ista said, oh, I was making $50 a week, but she was consistently doing that. It sounds so small, but if you're putting away these little bits of money, again, it's like it's grocery money or it's gas money. It sounds so small, but it's not. It's very helpful. And during medical school, I was married. Unfortunately, my husband passed away during the end of my intern year of residency, but he was working but wasn't making that much money. And we were living paycheck to paycheck. And something that I don't advise, so during my last year of medical school, we bought a home. We were still in debt. I had taken out 1 year of loans during medical school during my first year. And my parents, they said, okay, are you gonna do this your way? Or are you gonna have us help you? So I will say that I do come from a background of privilege where I do have a 2-income home, and I graduated with 1 year of loans as opposed to all 4 years. So I did want to preface that. But during the time in medical school, I was a tutor. So I was making that grocery money, the extra gas money. I was doing hair as well to make some extra money. And I wish if social media were a thing back then, I was an influencer, because it seems like that's where the money is, because there are influencers who are making more than me as a physician, but I'm not bitter. And I will say, when I graduated from medical school, I still wasn't financially literate. And it wasn't until my husband passed away that I was like, I need to get my life together. I got fed up of being financially illiterate and I needed a game plan. So I did create a budget and then was able to pay off that 1 year of the loans that I had in medical school, able to save up an emergency fund, and also saved up enough because I knew I needed a break after residency. So I needed enough to take 4 to 6 months off after residency. But it's all about like discipline and consistency. And you may have classmates who are living beyond their means, but it might be for show. But you staying true to yourself, like, can I actually afford this? If you're in medical school, probably not. And it's delayed gratification. But you're used to living like a medical student. You're used to living like a resident. When you're in residency, you're making a little bit of money, but still live like a medical student. You can still enjoy life, take trips and things. You just have to plan ahead. So after residency, I graduated 2019. I did take the 4 months off and then became an OB hospitalist, and I was making money because I knew eventually I wanted to do fellowship, and fellows, it's pretty much residency again in terms of how much you're making. So I worked. Sometimes I did 4 back-to-back 24-hour calls. So on 24, off 24, on, off. But I had a goal in mind, like I needed to save up at least 6 months of expenses because it was going to be rough. I had to fund a move by myself, and it was cross country from Seattle to Atlanta. But I knew that that following year, like I had a whole year to prepare for it. So it was like, okay, I'll pay the bills, and then the rest is going to go towards fellowship time. So I'm going to graduate fellowship end of this year, and that's going to be fully funded. It's going to be cash flowed. But if I did not have the money, yes, I would have delayed fellowship until I had the money, because that's just how I live.
Thank you. There's a question that I'm seeing a lot in the Q&A, and that I think we all applies to us, is there's this thing that people say you can't work in medical school, which I agree with, but then we all said that we did stuff or we have a work study job to make money in medical school. So I just wanted to clarify that I don't think, I haven't seen anyone, or I don't have the capability of working like a full-time job or even a part-time job while in medical school, because the demand is just so high. However, I actually don't know what other medical schools do, but my medical school, we have work study. So I was able to find a work study job, and I literally I'm only making about 50 or 70 a week, but it's still something that either covers my utilities, right? Or if that one weekend I decided I wanted to go out with friends, I have money for dinner, so those kind of things. I'm curious on everyone's opinion about investing in medical school. Do you invest? Is that something students in medical school should be thinking about? Or is that something we should wait until we clear our debt?
I'd love to answer this. So I get this often. And I'm a firm believer, right, that if you're borrowing loans, please don't take your loan money and invest it. You're going to lose money. You're paying interest, and the market is very vulnerable. However, if you have a little, savings, or you have some assistance and you're not borrowing loans for everything, there's tiny things you can do, right? So I am not saying this as a representative of Tufts right now, because this could be frowned upon. But I'm just saying, like, there's things like Acorns, right? So Acorns is an app that when you use your debit card, it rounds up your expense. So if you spent $5.28, it might, it's going to take the 80 cents. And once there's $5, it invests it. There's little tiny choices you can make and start your little investment portfolio. However, you shouldn't do this if you're a financial aid recipient. You should only be doing this if you're paying cash and someone's funding your bank account. You don't want to use student loans and invest. When you start working as a resident, you should 100% start putting money into your retirement at least, and even a little bit in investments at that time. And you do what you can afford and no more. But I think the theme that I'm seeing here is people are very disciplined and they're very consistent, right? If they're working, even if it's a small work study job, it's consistent earning and it's disciplined spending. And that's kind of the mind frame you really have to get in if you're someone that wants to graduate, maybe not even debt-free, but with as little debt as possible. Thank you.
I completely agree. It's just a bad idea to be in debt and investing, and you're trying to go to medical school. Your number one way to generate wealth is to finish your education. You will have plenty of time to invest, and you're not necessarily getting a large income during medical school. So I completely agree with Dean Olson that unless you have a partner that has a job who is able to invest in their retirement, or they have a match or something, I don't think it's a good idea. Now in residency, definitely put money towards retirement. That's something I actually didn't do because my late husband, he was putting into retirement. But if I were to think about it again, we could have both done it during that time. Yeah, I think there's just so much time, and you'll be making so much more money that will grow exponentially pretty much once you're in residency and then once you're making attending money.
And utilize financial planners. I think it's really important for this profession when you have, you're facing a lot of debt, but you also have a high potential for earning. I think you really want to get a professional financial planner's advice on how to handle different career intersections.
Thank you. I know we have about 10-ish more minutes left, so I'm going to have to be really stingy with my questions and then go into the Q&A. But I have 2 more questions, and then we'll move into the Q&A. I think my first question, what are some costs that came up throughout medical school that financial aid did not account for or you did not expect?
I can go first. So one of the reasons why I chose this fellowship in minimally invasive GYN surgery, specifically focusing on endometriosis, is because one day I was at my parents' house, I woke up in pain and had to go for surgery the next day. And guess what? I had endometriosis. So I had to pay for a whole surgery, even though I did have health insurance. So that was definitely unexpected. And it was around the time I was studying for step 2, very stressful. And also my late husband and I were thinking of like starting a family. And of course I was doing the UWorld question. And the question was, endometriosis patients are at increased risk for what? And the answer was infertility. So of course I went down this spiral of, oh, now I'm gonna need assisted reproductive technology and IVF. So that just led to a whole slew of things that I had to start thinking about that I didn't before. So that's an extreme, but it's something that came out of the blue.
For me, let's see. I'll say first year of medical school, although I knew that we had to participate in this, it's called CAP. It's a longitudinal primary care rotation that you do at the end of first year. I didn't know that I could be placed at a site that is like an hour away, and I had to drive, commute literally 2 hours every day. So that was a shock to me when that happened. But thankfully, I was very lucky. I was paired with a partner that offered rides here and there. So I did not spend a lot of money on gas and driving on to the sites. And then during 4th year, I was not ready for the amount of money it takes to transition from medical school to residence, because you finish, basically, I finished in March, end of March, that's when I finished. And then I started working June 16th. So that's what, 3 months in between where you're not making money. You have to move. A lot of people moved. I didn't move, thankfully for me. But then I had a baby that I had to take care of and all these things. My friends who moved across the country had to spend almost $10,000 moving, because you have to get a pod that has to be shipped all the way to California, these kind of things. And a lot of them did not know it was gonna take this, huge amount of money to be able to move across countries. And also, I think it's also because when you are applying for residency, there's something called a match where you don't know where you're going to end up. So you wait on on match day to find out where you're going. So you may end up somewhere close to where you are right now, or somewhere completely across the country. So there's this uncertainty with 4th year that complicates things a little bit. So I wish I had known more about that process, and would have been more prepared for the transition between medical school and residency. I still haven't received my first paycheck, so.
Thank you. And then my last question is for Dr. Odunsi, and then we'll go into the Q&A. For a physician who wants to go back for more training, how do you advise that they navigate that financial transition from an attending salary back to a fellow salary, or if they're wanting to do a whole new residency?
Right. So the principles would be the same, that if you know you're going to want to do that, you plan ahead. So you'll have at least 9 months to know, because if you go through the match for fellowship, you'll probably get a lead time of 6 to 9 months. So you can plan ahead. If you come into a residency knowing you're going to do a fellowship, you can do as Ista did, set aside your fellowship savings and do that. Like I said, I just worked really, really hard during my attending life. It was short-lived. I have an attending, but I knew that I didn't want to take out any loans or get into debt going into this fellowship. And then when I moved here, so it was a cross-country move, I knew it was going to be about 10K. So I set aside that, planned out what the budget was for the apartment. Like, I'm not going over this amount, and then calculated what the utilities would be for Atlanta, not Seattle, and the cost of living in Atlanta versus Seattle, because Seattle is actually more expensive than Atlanta. And then worked backwards with the math for 12 months, and then also factored in emergency. So again, I have health things going on, like imaging, blah, 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 blah. I might need surgery again. So I'm planning for those things eventually. So it's just a pattern. It's a habit that I have. And yeah, I think just planning ahead is key, and keeping your priorities straight. Like, I wouldn't go on some huge vacation if I knew I was going to be in fellowship. So I'm only going on a huge vacation after I'm done, pretty much. But all my other trips are either local or to visit family, not necessarily international, but I can also blame COVID on that. So I don't have to come up with excuses. But yeah, I still reward myself. I still decorated the apartment. You can see back there. I don't feel like a medical student. I still am able to splurge sometimes. But because I've been so disciplined since 2017 was when I was like, I need to get my life together with the money. I've worked this muscle, and now it's just easier to do.
Yeah, that's something I'm still guilty of. I currently don't have a budget. I'm just like, it's in the bank account, so we'll get it sorted out one day. So that's definitely something I know I'm going to take away and work on. This question is for Dean Olson, and I'm noticing different variations of this, but I think a lot of people are curious of how does what you report to financial aid change depending on who you are? So if you're like an independent student and you don't have any family members you can get information from, or if you're married, do you still have to use parental information, or do you now use your spouse's income? Or if your parents have a high expected family contribution, but they've already said, don't put us in this, we're not helping you with anything. I guess people are a lot curious how to navigate those different financial situations.
Okay, so your marital status on the day that you complete your FAFSA is going to determine what income you're including for your spouse. So if you're married and you're doing your FAFSA today, you are going to include your spouse's information. Now, financial aid is 2 years prior, right? It's a prior year. So in 21-22, we're using 2019 income. Even if you weren't married in 2019 and you just got married yesterday, you still have to include both you and your spouse's information. If you're getting married tomorrow, fill out your FAFSA today, so you don't have to include spouse's information, right? So it's all based on the date. Now, everybody's considered independent for federal aid when they are a graduate or professional student, which is medical student. So you don't have to submit parental information. You're still entitled to federal loans, but you're not going to be considered for institutional aid at some schools if you don't include parental information. So this is where I'm going to kind of revert back. It's really important to find out what schools are requiring. I encourage everybody to just include parental information at least their first year. You can only include 10 schools on your FAFSA. So if schools don't use it, they're not going to use any information. They're going to just base it on students. But I think about 90%, if not higher, are going to use the parental information. If they aren't helping you, they're not helping you. But unfortunately, there's got to be a way to sort through when you're giving need-based aid away. Some schools have merit, and that's based on your academic performance and what you've completed to date. We don't have merit aid. We have a firm belief that we want to help our neediest students first and foremost before we start doing merit awards. So there's no room for flexibility if you're just strictly need-based. But I would say include your parents' information. It's not going to hurt you.
Thank you. The next question here is, I'll combine these two. How long does it take to pay off loans? And can you pay off your loans by choosing a certain residency?
So it's going to take you, it could take you 20 years. It could take you 25 years. After 20 years, your loans are going to be forgiven. So if there's anything remaining and you've been paying, there's public loan service forgiveness that says once you've been paying for 10 years, if you're working at a nonprofit, you have a potential to have your loans repaid. Well, it's really forgiven. It really depends. There's some people that get really aggressive. They don't want that debt hanging over their head, and they're going to make double, triple, quadruple payments. They're going to put everything towards that, loan payment. It's a psychology of money. Everyone has a different connection to money. It's a tough one to answer.
Yeah. One more question for you, and I think this has come up on YouTube as well as here, but I know this is going to depend on the school, but can you touch maybe a little bit with whatever knowledge you may have about how international students can get funded if they are schooling in the US for medical school?
So there are there's some resources available. A lot of the resources are going to be private loans. I think the biggest challenge becomes is if they have, a lot of them will require a US cosigner. So there are some specific loans that do not require a US cosigner, but there's very few at this time. We don't really have it. We accept international students, but domestic students get an overall priority. And we have a lot of applicants at our school. So I don't have a lot of experience working too much with international students. I can say there are some options out there. I don't know if any of the other panelists have more to add to that.
Yeah, only really in talking with some of my friends who are international students, the best thing that they have said is that there are some medical schools that will ask you for proof you have all 4 years of medical school in a bank account before they even maybe look at your application. So there are some schools that will not look at you unless you can show proof of some kind of bank account that's going to show how you're going to pay. Some schools accept international students, but like those top 20 that accept international students also are very generous with money too. So one thing I've heard from my international friend is they were applying to a lot of the top institutions because those were the only institutions that would give them like scholarship money. And then the only other option I've heard of is like self-pay or private loan, or if maybe you have a nice friend in the US that's gonna borrow you $96K every year. I don't know. I don't have a friend like that, but if you do. So that's kind of the little I know. But just to confirm, international students wouldn't be filling out the FAFSA because that's for domestic students, correct?
Yes. So they would not be eligible for aid as it stands now. I mean, that can change. Financially, it's fluid. Congress changes things all the time. We don't know what's forthcoming, but as it stands today, that's correct. In the 4 years in the bank account that you described, that's actually a visa requirement. In order to be issued a student visa, you have to show that you can support yourself. Some schools will do it for 2 years and others will require 4 years.
Wonderful. Thank you for that clarification. 2 more questions, and then I know our time is fast spent. I think we kind of talked about this, but for Dr. Odunsi, how do you build multiple streams of income, maybe outside of medical school even now? And what were other, I think we already talked about this, like what we did in medical school, but if someone is curious about how you still are building multiple streams and how you build generational wealth. Oh, wait, you're muted.
Good question. I did leave some stats in the chat about the rate of student loan forgiveness. It's not very high. And I just wanted to make a comment that I don't like owing people money. So I am one of those people that just wants to pay it off as soon as possible. I don't want to wait for the government to take care of me. I want to take care of myself. So I would advise to just handle your business and get rid of the debt. And then for your question, multiple streams of income, I started off by getting the debt paid, and then I started investing. I got a financial advisor when I moved to Seattle and sat down and talked about what my goals were for the next maybe 3 to 5 years and what that would look like. And I wanted somebody who had the heart of a teacher, because I didn't really know that much about investing. So she was able to answer all my questions and started from scratch so that I would have some sort of financial literacy. The next thing I did, so my investments, it's something I can sleep. I don't worry. I haven't worried about the pandemic. It fluctuates. I'm not going to take my money out just because of a pandemic. Like it follows patterns. So I know it's going to grow if I just leave it alone and meet with my advisor, maybe quarterly. And that's something, I'm making money while I sleep that way. The next thing I tried was the influencer thing, and it was fine, but it was too much work, honestly. But maybe if I wasn't a physician, I could have done that full time. It's something I still do on the side, but I'm very much passionate about helping professional women to change their negative mindsets and also work on their goals and visions. So in the end of 2020, I decided I'm going to become a mindset coach. So I do coach professional women, not just physicians. I just released a course. It's a 14-day course. I'm promoting myself. It's fine. To help women really attack those mindsets that they may have had during medical school, and now they're in the professional world and they don't know how to reach those higher goals that they've set for themselves. Other things I'm interested in are real estate. I did have a home during residency, and I was a first-time landlord, had a property manager, and the property was in a different state. I was in Connecticut, the property was in Delaware. So that was actually a way, once I sold the home at the end of residency, I did make some cash. So that was another income stream. I know some people do Airbnb. I never tried it, but that could be something I do. My sisters are also interested in real estate, so we may go in on a multiplex, multifamily home. I'm also interested in things that require not too much work. So if I go in with a bunch of physicians, we buy a real estate property, the property manager or the apartment complex, they're going to take care of all the nitty gritty things. I just need to put cash towards it. So I want to find things I can put cash towards now that I have that revenue from these other areas. Other things that are scarier is investing in single stocks. I haven't done that yet, but my sister has. It's riskier. I think I'm conservative. Trying to think of what else people do. Podcasting makes money too. Anything you can think of. I've also thought of buying a studio, and you know how people need studios to take photos? That's such an easy thing to do. I'll just hire staff. Don't take my idea. Hire staff. And people schedule time to come do their photography sessions. I have no photography experience, but again, throw in the cash, get the business plan, and have a team, and you just rinse and repeat that over and over again. So that's probably going to be my strategy.
Thank you. To close out the event, as you all probably know, I am super passionate about financial freedom and really just planning ahead and having a plan of knowing what to expect, right? I'm the kind of person that I'm mapping out how much I'm going to be borrowing, how to pay it back. I already have this 5-year plan of how I'm going to pay back my loans, and I haven't even taken out all the loans yet. So I am curious, to wrap up this event, what is the biggest piece of advice each of you can give to students either in medical school, going into medical school, residents? What is the one biggest financial piece of advice you can give to us to hold on to for the rest of our lives?
That's a huge statement. Plan. Do not be afraid to ask for help. talk to your family, talk to your financial aid office. But if you are someone that is going to stay up at night worrying about debt, you have to commit to really living like a student and being frugal and having roommates and making decisions now, sacrifices really, to minimize your living expenses. So you're really borrowing only what you truly need and have a path to financial freedom, maybe early on in your career. But, take advantage of freebies and coupons, eat free food at school, ask for those student discounts. They're everywhere and people never, ever ask or use them. So just be committed and disciplined in your lifestyle while you're a student and as a resident. And you will be at a different place because you're borrowing from future earnings.
I'll go next. I'll say live below your means. Talk to people. Talk to people about money, because you never know what people are doing with their money. They may have some good ideas that you can actually adopt and help you financially. And the last thing I'll say is invest in your financial literacy education. The more you know about your financial situation, the more you learn about financial freedom and how to get there, the better you feel about yourself, and the easier it is for you to get to that financial goal. It is good to have financial planners and advisors, but I also think that when you educate yourself about your financial situation, your goals, what stocks, what index funds, what ETFs to invest in, you have this sense of power over, you have control over your financial life. So take some time to educate yourself about financial literacy. You will see that you will feel much better about yourself and about your financial future.
I would say that a growth mindset is that you can change your financial situation. As an immigrant and coming from a family that didn't have much money and struggled, it's amazing what hard work and discipline can do. And people would say, oh, your dad's a physician. He didn't come here with much. My mom didn't come here with much, and she had 3 young children. So I believe that if my parents can do it, anyone can do it. And it's not about being a physician. If you were a janitor, I would be saying the same thing. You have to get out of this stuck mentality that you can't do it. You actually can, and you can build generational wealth. And as Ista said, you have to educate yourself too. You don't need to be a financial advisor, like at the financial advisor status, but if you're going to be investing your money, you should know where it's going and what it's doing. And just like you wouldn't let anybody just operate on you, you would do your research on the physician. And if you were sending your family to them, you would do your research as well. So don't play around with that. You want to go to somebody who actually teaches you what you need to know. And also you learn for yourself, because there are a lot of shady people out there. And your mind and your knowledge is your biggest source of power. You have full control. You can change your generational trajectory and your future generations. My goal is I don't want my great grandkids to worry about anything. I don't want my kids paying for college, nothing. So I have this vision, and it's bigger than me, but we have people who are doing that already. So why not you? Another thing I would say is get accountability partners. I speak freely about not just my successes with finances, but my failures. And it's okay. And I don't think you need to feel shame about it. You start from somewhere, and then you keep making forward progression in those positive changes. There is absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. 70% of Americans can't afford a $1,000 emergency. Did you know that? And people are living paycheck to paycheck. So it's actually normal to have debt and to be struggling and to live paycheck to paycheck. But I want you to be the unicorn and the one who is just like, I'm going to cash flow that today. I'm going to put cash down for a house. Why not? And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. This has been so helpful. There have been gems that I have taken away that I'm going to go work on tonight. I am just so grateful for your time. I know you guys were all busy. You guys are doing amazing work in your own respective fields. So thank you so much for coming on here. If you are comfortable dropping your contact information, a lot of students still had questions that I either couldn't get to, or it felt kind of maybe a more one-on-one kind of conversation. If you're comfortable, please drop maybe your Instagram name or your email, just so students can keep in contact with you. And thank you all so much for watching this. Tomorrow, we'll be having our Deans of Admission panel. We're gonna hear from them how to get into medical school, what they're looking for, red flags. You do not want to miss tomorrow's session. Thank you guys so much for coming, and everyone have a great evening.